Welcome to one more in.MIND series. Bem-vindos a mais uma série do in.MIND. Estamos super felizes de poder oferecer essa opção para todo mundo assistir e ter acesso a um conteúdo riquíssimo que tem tudo a ver com os pilares da Escola Concept. Na Escola Concept, a gente pensa em 4 pilares: sustentabilidade, empreendedorismo, colaboração e fluência digital. E toda semana a gente traz convidados muito especiais que são parceiros da nossa escola para fazerem talks que são ligados aos nossos pilares. Hoje estamos aqui com a Bena Kallick e com Art Costa. Eles são grandes parceiros da nossa instituição. Eles trabalham na Concept com a gente, juntos com o nosso projeto, desde o início do projeto, trazendo a relevância de um currículo socioemocional bastante forte e pautado em princípios que foram pesquisados ao longo de anos. Esses princípios, as pesquisas que eles fizeram se iniciaram há mais de 30 anos. E com suas pesquisas, eles conseguiram identificar 16 hábitos da mente. E esses hábitos da mente fazem parte desse currículo socioemocional tão forte que a gente acredita e trabalha com na Escola Concept. Então, com isso, eu vou dar as boas-vindas tanto para a Bena quanto para o Art. É uma grande honra a gente ter os dois aqui ao mesmo tempo, trabalhando com a gente, compartilhando com a gente e trocando ideias ao longo desse processo. O nosso talk de hoje vai começar com a Bena e o Art falando e apresentando um pouco sobre habits of mind, sobre coaching on thinking, sobre como os pais podem trabalhar com os filhos ao longo desse processo. E depois, no final, a gente vai abrir para perguntas e respostas, com perguntas que forem aparecendo no chat e também com perguntas que a nossa equipe, os nossos colaboradores conseguiram compilar ao longo dessa última semana. Então, com isso, Bena, thank you so much for being here. Art, thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure and honor, and I am going to hand it over to you guys to allow you guys to share knowledge and great tips and great topics with families, with educators, and with anyone else who is interested in learning more about what it means to be a coach of thinking during these times. So thank you, Art, and thank you, Bena.
Thank you for inviting us. It's really so nice to be here with you.
Exciting.
We're going to share some slides with you, and then I think we're going to have questions afterwards, and I believe that probably Priscilla already told you that. So let me just, get this. Here we go. So our title here is Parents as Coaches of Thinking. And one of the things that we're really trying to come across with is to say that you, parents, but also anyone who is an adult with young children, but especially you as parents, partner with the school. And you really are able to think about how you would coach for thinking. The 4 pillars of Escola Concept are really important to that, because they really are developing students so that they become digitally fluent, meaning that they're able to use the technologies of today's world and use them comfortably and be able to be flexible in thinking about them, that they're also concerned with sustainability. They're concerned about climate change. They're concerned about what is going on in our planet. And certainly in this day and age, that is a tremendously important thing for them to be concerned about, but not only to be concerned, but when we get them to collaboration, they come together and they actually begin to problem solve. They begin to ask questions. They begin to wonder, what can we do to help with this problem? And then, as I've seen in many of the students in Escola when I've visited, they are entrepreneurial. They not only are concerned with how they're going to solve problems, they begin to experiment and think about solving problems, making models, thinking about applications. One young girl who developed a way of making necklaces, somebody else who designed something that's a wonderful 3D idea of how you would use a cup in a new way. So they're entrepreneurial, they're fluent with technology, they're really thinking and caring for our universe, and at the same time, doing that collaboratively as problem solvers. So we were invited to join Escola Concept and to really think about what would serve as a foundation for those 4 pillars. And we have really developed with Escola Concept the 16 habits of mind as a foundation for the 4 pillars.
Perhaps some of you know about the habits of mind already. For some of you, this may be brand new. So let me take just a little bit of time to review and refresh you and to introduce you to the habits of mind. First of all, you might have remembered that when you were going to school, you were probably valued and tested to see how many answers you could give on a test, or when the teacher would ask you a question, whether you could answer the question correctly. And that was wonderful. We learned that way. However, as we think about your children's future, they need a lot more than just having right answers, because the future is going to be even more complex, even more ambitious, even more ambiguous, even more uncertain and more complex than what it is today. So how do we prepare your students for living in that very uncertain kind of future? Well, it's not only having right answers, but it's also knowing how to behave when you don't know the answer. And that's where the habits of mind come in. All of these habits of mind are dispositions that go on inside your head when you're confused, when you're in conflict, when you're in situations in which the answers are not readily apparent. For example, do you persist? Can you stick to it over time? Do you work with other people interdependently? Do you think creatively or flexibly in order to solve the problem? Do you take a risk and try it out? Do you communicate with clarity and precision? All of these are responses that you give when you don't know what to do. And that's what we're preparing your students for, is how to behave when you're under those uncertain situations that you don't know the answer immediately. And we also know that parents are the very first teachers. And so what we are about today is to work with you to see how you can become parents as partners in this process. And we are going to share with you 5 roles that you can play as parents in this process of partnering with the teachers and the schools. So here they are. First of all, that you learn to use the language of the habits of mind. And the reason why this is important is because it is much more likely that your children will learn to use and understand the habits of mind if they hear it not only from their teacher, but also if they hear it from you as parents at home.
We also know that you've been through some pretty unusual circumstances. We all have. It's a pandemic, and we're all really living with that. And so what we're trying to say is that it's really important that we develop, if there was ever a time when you need something that's going to help us to say, what do I do when I'm not really sure what to do? You can turn to some of the habits of mind. So when you see your child, for example, or children, for example, and they're really trying hard, I mean, it's frustrating. I'm not sure I can really do this. You're recognizing and encouraging them by using the language of the habits of mind. So you can say, Jose, when you're feeling so much that it's just the most difficult thing in the world, try persisting, but then not just try persisting, but let me tell you what you can do that will help you to try persisting. So when I feel that it's very difficult, I often will do something like walk away from it, take a break, and then come back. And then I'll find that I'm better at persisting. So why don't you perhaps do that right now?
Another role that you can play is to be alert to situations in which you and your children can use the habits of mind. And so when you know that there's going to be some conflict or some problem or some different kind of situation that's going to need some adjustment, you might alert your students, your children, to this so that they can use the habits of mind when they're in that situation. You almost want to alert them to the fact that they're going to need to use one or more of the habits of mind in a situation that is coming up.
And modeling is very, very important. As I was suggesting what I said, when you're modeling the idea, here's something that I do when I'm persisting. We had a wonderful child who told us that, well, in one of her little journal entries, she said, my mom was really upset when she was driving in New York City. And she was so upset with the traffic there, and she was beginning to get very, very angry. And I said, Mommy, you really should be managing your impulsivity. So it's not only that the children are knowing this language, but they're asking their parents, model this. Show us that you can do it the same way you're asking us to do it. Modeling is really one of the most important ways that kids learn, because they learn through imitation.
And we would hope that you as a family make a commitment to using the habits of mind. Sometimes you might think about, well, do we as a family, do we really listen to each other? So you might want to say to them, well, next time around the dinner table, let's practice our listening and making sure that we are listening to understand each other with understanding and empathy. Or let's persist. Let's make sure that we know how to stick to something until we get it done. Or if there's confusion, let's make a commitment that we're going to try to clarify and be clear with our directions or our instructions or our feelings, so that as a family, what we want to do is make a commitment to use and to improve the use of these habits of mind. Let's take a look at each one of these now and see how you might play a role in these 5 partnering positions. Bena?
So the first one that we talked about was language. And, it's really very often people will say, oh, this is such a sophisticated language. I'm not sure that we can use it with our little ones. And yet we find that sometimes our little ones are so enchanted with the language. They love to be able to use something like this. I remember when I first visited one of the schools in Escola, I think I was in the Sao Paulo school in Escola Concept. And one of the teachers of the toddlers, so I guess they were like 3 years old, and she had me come in and I visited, and she said, what you should do is you should really ask this child, and I forget what the child's name was, but you should ask him, which is his favorite habit? And so I said to him, which is your favorite habit? Do you have a favorite habit? And he said, oh, yes, I like thinking interdependently, because thinking interdependently means I can play with my friends. And then he showed me what he does. And it was such a wonderful thing to see this young Brazilian child speaking in English as accurately as he was, telling me that that was his favorite one. But notice, he was able to use the language. The language feels right to him. It's only we as adults who say, oh, it may be too much for them. They love to be able to do that. And then as kids get older, when you're talking to your children and they're saying, well, you really do need to be managing your impulsivity, or you do need to be thinking now. How do you know that you're right? Are you striving for accuracy? Maybe you need to think about checking it again. So what we're saying is, you use the language when you say things like, hey, hang in there, don't give up. You need to persist. So remember to put the language of the habit right after what you're describing as the behavior you're looking for. Here's a child who will show you how she uses the language in gathering data with all senses. She's from Cambodia. She's 4 years old.
Today I am going to show you my nice wooden house. I like to make something for playing, and it is made from wood because it is strong. So using my sense of sight, this dog It is opaque and it is rigid. Using my sense of touch, it is smooth, it is hard, and it is strong. I hope you like my nice wooden house. Do you like my nice wooden house? Okay, bye-bye, teacher.
So it's such a beautiful example of how she really, whoops, I'm going to play it again and I don't mean to. Wait a minute.
Hi, I am Rexa. Today I am going to...
Okay, so it's such a beautiful example of how she is really using this as a way to show you how she gathers data with all the senses.
Another thing that you can do as parents is to observe your students and recognize when they are using the habits of mind and label it as such so that you see that they are using the habits of mind. Let them know it. For example, Bena, give us some examples.
So, for example, I lost it here, sorry.
Next one.
I know, but I'm having trouble. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, so for example, when we're using the language yourself and you're encouraging it with others, you can say, so when you were watching the sunrise, that was really awesome for you, wasn't it? Or you really persisted with that problem. I'm proud of you. You and your sister were thinking interdependently when they were playing. And I noticed that you were willing to share with each other and pay attention to how each other were actually using the tools together or using the toys together. So it's really about saying that you are really paying attention to this. As your kids get older and they're really beginning to want to do something, you'll find that sometimes they need to be thinking about, I don't think this is as difficult. And you say, you remembered, you applied your past knowledge, and that was very helpful to you. So what we're suggesting is you use the language as a part of your encouragement.
Here's one example of a student at home, a child at home, using the language. She said, one way I have persisted through this time was I was baking chocolate cookies. I had gotten stuck on a question my parents asked me about measurements. The question was, how many times does 4 go into 10? I had gotten stuck a few times, but then I kept trying. I persisted. And then I found out that 2 times 5 equals 10. Then I said, 4 can go into 10 2 times because 5 times 2 equals 10 with a remainder of 2. And so here's an example in which the student is recognizing that they are using the habit of mind of persisting. Here's another example of a student who is learning to use a skateboard. One way I persisted through this pandemic is keeping physically active. I do different workouts. I also run and practice soccer on Wednesdays. I go skating to a school near me with my older brother, and I walk my dog. I found that keeping physically active is not only fun, but it helps me stay healthy. And so he's learning to persist and to stay healthy.
Now, there are times when you need to be anticipating situations, something that's going to happen. So it's not always something that happened in the past, but something that may be happening now. I remember when my youngest son, who is now over 50 years old, but when he was younger, I do remember what I used to help him to do. And that was, he was very nervous about traveling. And so I would say, well, John, I think it would be important if you started to plan. Let's think about your thinking. Let's see, what is it that you might use inside your head that will tell you that you're ready to go traveling? So for example, how about if you make a list? What would go on your list? And can you, would that go on your list? Maybe you need to be striving for accuracy. I'm not sure we'll be able to take all of that with us. So I remember that it was very important for him to be able to plan, to be able to monitor his progress as he was planning, and to be able to realize afterwards that it was very helpful for him. All of that was all about my coaching him for his thinking and helping him to realize that he was doing what we call metacognition, thinking about your thinking. So there are examples. For example, when we say, when your grandma comes over, it might be difficult for her to understand that you will need to understand what she's saying to you. So be kind, be grateful that you are able to hear her, and be sure that you listen with understanding and empathy as she speaks with you. As you're solving this problem, be aware of what's going on inside your head. As I suggested with John, I wanted him to be aware of what is going on inside his head, because when you're aware of what's going on inside your head, you will be thinking about your thinking, which gives you what we refer to in the executive function as better control over your thinking as well. And then you might say, I see you reluctant to use that skateboard. It looks like it would be a lot of fun, yet I see you hesitating. Go ahead, take a responsible risk. So we're saying to them that this is the language of the habits, and we're coaching them to be able to become more effective and independent as thinkers.
Of all of these 5 roles that you can play as parents, probably the most powerful is that of modeling. In other words, you have to live and be the habits of mind yourself. For example, you might want to share with the students, with your children, about your own use of the habits of mind. For example, when I was a kid, I didn't manage my impulsivity very well. I used to get into trouble sometimes with my parents or with the teacher. But now I'm learning to manage my impulsivity even better. And so as I grew up, as I matured, I had to think about being calm and thinking first before I act. Or share some experiences in your business. For example, if you have a staff that you have to work with, in my business, my staff has to think together interdependently. Or I try to get my staff to be creative, to envision other possibilities, and to think flexibly. I know you're upset. I want you to listen with understanding and empathy. Sometimes it's hard when we're upset. We yell back, we shout back, we get angry, but we have to think first, and we want to slow down and listen to each other with understanding and empathy. Or let's say that you're taking a walk with your child. Let them see you stop and smell the flowers. Take a deep breath, listen to the breeze, listen to the swaying of the palm trees, and share with them that when you're watching the sunset, you also think it's awesome and inspiring. Let them think that this flower is beautiful so that they find the habits of mind in all that they encounter and they respond to it. You are the embodiment of the habits of mind, so you must model them for your students, and that's probably the most reinforcing and powerful ways that they will learn. Children learn long before they ever start to come to school, because you, as a parent, are their first teachers. And so you are setting their values and their behaviors. So you, as a model, is one of the most important roles that you play as a parent.
And I guess one of the things that we feel very strongly about is they're as good for adults as they are for kids. In fact, maybe while you're just listening to this presentation, you're thinking, oh, I wonder whether I really do manage my impulsivity when I'm getting angry. Am I able to say to myself, I mean, not that you shouldn't express anger, but am I able to say to myself, stop, and just think for a moment before you just blurt something out? Are you able to say to yourself, when you are actually setting the table for dinner, are you able to say to yourself, I really wonder whether there'll be enough of this or enough of that? And do you find yourself striving for accuracy as you're trying to think about that? In other words, we believe very strongly that it's really all of us who need to think about this. We think about these habits of mind, these dispositions, as life skills. They're not just good for the kids, they're good for all of us, because they're the essential skills that we need, especially in these turbulent times. We need to be able to say to ourselves that we are going to listen to one another with understanding and empathy. And listening to one another with understanding and empathy is really the beginning of perhaps the way we can get back as citizens in terms of civil discourse, being able to really become a part of the world that we're in with positive actions. And so we then say, when we are directing, giving directions to someone, we want to be sure, for example, that when we're saying that we expect something, that we're thinking and we're communicating with clarity and precision, that we're really able to say that we not only are asking you to do something, like, for example, I find myself, I might say, I delegate this to someone. Would you get this done for me? And then I'll stop and I'll think for a moment and I'll say, well, what do I mean when I say this? What this am I referring to? And get it done? What would it look like if it were done? And would I be happy with it? So when I'm delegating and saying, will you do this? I'm also needing to get explicit enough and communicate with enough clarity that I won't be disappointed when it isn't done the way I would like it. So I've learned over the years that that clarity and precision when you're asking someone else to do something for you is critically important. And we know, of course, in every workplace, it's critically important as well. And then we think about thinking flexibly and realizing that we really need to have as many possibilities as we can have. And often we see habits of mind pairing up. So you might say that when you're persisting and you're getting stuck, one thing that you might consider is try something else. So then that says that persisting pairs up nicely with thinking flexibly. When you're doing something, can you then think of an alternative or another way of doing it? So we're not saying that these 16 habits are 16 separate habits, but that they work as a whole for you because they all are so integrated in terms of promoting more effective thinking.
So what we have tried to do is to share with you 5 roles that you could play as parents, partnering with the school and with the teachers, using the language, alerting your students to your children to situations in which they're going to use the habits of mind, making commitment as a family, and finally, that you, as a parent, must model all those behaviors yourself. And as Robert Fulghum said, don't worry that your children never listen to you, worry that they're always watching you. You have to behave and model and embody the habits of mind as well. Thank you very much for letting us be with you.
Okay, Priscilla, do you want to switch to being able to do questioning?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Bena. Thank you, Art. I was having a little trouble transferring back in, but I was able to
Did I stop sharing my screen, Priscilla, so they can see us?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Got it.
So thank you, Art. Thank you, Bena, for sharing such thoughtful words with us with regards to how parents can potentialize the use of habits of mind and can potentialize the thinking inside of their homes. After all, we're all educators in this process, and we all need to be in this together with regards to how we bring up our children. And with that being said, one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I have another screen over to the side, so you'll see me looking over, is that the whole part of learning through imitation and learning through modeling and how powerful that is. I was talking to a few other friends of mine who are educators the other day, and one of the things that we were addressing was the fact that during these COVID times, we want children to be in healthy, thoughtful environments because they will remember these environments and they will remember this time that they were living in. And if the environment at home is healthy and is conducive to thinking, children will have a much richer experience and a much more relevant experience when it comes to their development as people, as human beings, and how important it is for families to know what to share in front of children, know what to do in front of children, because we are their greatest role models and they're always watching us, right? I don't know if you guys want to comment on that.
I think it's so important. And the other piece that you're saying is something that I think we need to understand. As important as our language for habits of mind is, children also need a language for their emotional life. And so we need to help them to be able to say, I'm really scared. Or like one child said, I just hate this coronavirus. And allowing them to say that, because it definitely is presenting a disruption in their lives.
Right.
But then the question is, how do you begin to move forward from that? So it's really allowing for them to say their frustration and then to say, let's try creating, imagining, and innovating. It might be a time when we can take what your frustration is and turn it into a piece of art, for example. Or let's go out to play in the sand, or whatever it is, that we want to take it and we want to create something out of it that gives them a way forward. So I think it's really important that they learn a language for how they feel emotionally, that they're able to say it, and that we can't really rescue them from those feelings. We can only help them to move forward.
It also gives a wonderful opportunity for you as parents then to practice your empathy. So when a child says he's afraid, you say, yes, you are afraid because we don't know what's in the future for us. Or you say, it is very stressful for you to be locked up at home all the time and we can't go out like we used to. So that you have an opportunity then to listen to your child and paraphrase their language and their emotions. So that would show that you are empathizing with them. And it's a wonderful opportunity for you to bond with your children in that way.
Exactly. I think that is so well said, that allowing children to express themselves and allowing them to find the language of clarity and precision and accuracy to be able to do so, right? And allowing them to feel the feelings that they have to feel. It's not always going to be happy, right? Getting into a routine at home is tough. It's tough for us as adults and as educators. It's tough for parents. It's tough for everybody. And I think that we sometimes we just have to stop make believing that it's easy, right? And stop pretending that everything is just beautiful and everything can just be seen through rose-colored glasses and everything is just fun and everything's going to be exciting. But it's important for us to recognize that children will be frustrated, that they will test their limits, that they will cry, that they will be bored, that they will resist routine, that they will, I think now most of them are used to online school, but some of them will resist online learning. And that as parents, we also need to make sure that we're showing our children what really matters, what's important, and how they need to create routines and establish processes and procedures during these tough times, because it's not all going to be fun for all the kids involved, right? And I think that is so important for us to acknowledge that.
When you empathize, you're not only paraphrasing or reflecting back the negative feelings. You're angry, you're stressful, you're stressed out, you're frustrated, but also do it for the happy ones too. You're excited about getting back to school. You're overjoyed with the fact that you've mastered your skateboard. So that let them know that that there are positive feelings and stressful feelings, and both can be understood and empathized with.
So I think our big point in all of this is, I think about it, and I think the first thing that we have to say is that in terms of what we would refer to as Maslow's hierarchy, the most important thing is that we know that they feel safe. And we know that we are comfortable talking with them about their fear, because we're all fearful. And then to really be able to think about what we can do about that, how we begin to feel safe because we know that we have expressed it, and that we can try now to think about what we can do to help ourselves feel better about things. What makes us feel good? If you think about the habit of mind of applying past knowledge, one of the things you can say is, so When was a time when you really felt happy? When was a time when you really felt safe? And what was it that made you feel safe? Because I've had those conversations with children where they've said, well, I actually feel safe when I have my teddy bear. Well, maybe you need to go get it now. Maybe you don't wait till you go to bed. Maybe you need to go get it now. I think we as parents are walking a very fine line, and it's a difficult one. We don't want to encourage regression. And on the other hand, we do want to encourage progress. And yet we know that we are now disrupted. And this is a difficult time for us. So some of us might go back to, and our children might go back to old habits that make us feel safe. And then we have to make our way through that. And we have to remind them of their capabilities and remind them of their great capacity to do things. So I think it's really important that we notice that. The other thing that I've been thinking about is that schools really are charged with and are given the privilege to help students to be students, meaning to study. We give them the opportunity to study. We often provide that through the content that we teach, through the skills that we teach, through the 4 pillars where we excite their imagination and their perspective on becoming somebody and who will they become. So in school, that is our role. And I was thinking that at home, really, it's our role to encourage that, to foster that, but not to feel that you need to know it all. What you need to know is how to ask the kinds of questions that get them to begin to tell you what's on their mind. So instead of saying, when they say, I can't do this math problem, it's probably more helpful for you not to believe you need to teach them how to do the math problem, as it is to be able to say, so what part of this problem is a problem for you? What part of this don't you understand? And if in fact you can encourage them, how might you ask your teacher to help you with this? In other words, we don't need to become the teacher now. We need to become the people who coach them to think and to begin to get their thinking more progressed so that they become more masters of their thinking or masterful in their thinking. I think that is a great role for parents at this time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, Bena, because if we want to have children as protagonists of their learning, that's where it starts, right? It starts with, now that children are at home, it starts at home with parents really empowering children, right? And not being the problem solvers for their children and not wanting to save them, right, from every hiccup, but to allow them to actually process their thinking, to allow them to think about their thinking, right? Really engaging in metacognitive processes, so that they can identify what is it that they know, what is it that they don't know, what is it that they still need to learn, what are the questions that they need to go back and ask their teacher. And I feel that sometimes parents do have that burden on their shoulders that now they've become the teacher, versus if you're asking the right questions, you're then empowering the child and you don't have to become the teacher. So, there's a fine line there that I think we all need to learn how to navigate, especially during these times. And what we're going to end up, the result of all this will end up being adults that are more secure, that are more empowered, and that have more self-confidence as well, right?
So you just have to step back and ask yourself, so who do you want in your workplace? Because if you think about it and if you imagine, who do I want in my workplace? I want somebody who's excited about working. I want somebody who has some initiative. I want somebody who can be self-managing so I don't have to tell them everything. And I want somebody who knows how to solve problems. And if you think about all of that, then you can't start too young to help them to become that.
That's right. That's right. Another thing that the two of you pointed out was the fact of using clear language. And I made a note of that in my on my computer here on my other screen, where the importance of really identifying what the child is doing, not just saying, great job, well done, that's beautiful, but really using that language of specificity to explain what the child is doing. And the young lady from Cambodia, she did such a beautiful job in doing that herself, right? She said, I'm using my sight, I'm using my sense of touch, right? This is smooth, this is rough. And she went on to explain that. And a connection that I make with that is Angela Salmon. We had the opportunity of having her with us from FIU during one of our morning bites. And she also emphasized the importance of being specific when speaking to a child, and when identifying something that the child has done, and when identifying a habit of mind that the child is engaging in. And both you and Art touched on that, and that is, it's just a small thing that can make a huge difference, right?
Yes. So that when your child does something, you don't just say great or good for you, but rather if you said, hey, you really persisted, you really found this awesome, you used all of your senses, so that you explain why it's so good. You can say it's good because you used all your senses. It's great because you drew on your past knowledge, so that they see the reasoning behind what makes something good or valued.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. And I think it's so important for parents to think about that, and for teachers to think about that too, because many times we can be caught in situations where we're just generalizing and saying, great job, well done. But what do we really mean by that, right? What was well done? What was a great job? And how do we define greatness, right? Giving children that clear definition from the beginning sets those habits in terms of what do they then need to do to be able to make those habits ongoing habits and practices in their lives.
It's much more likely that they will repeat the habit then when they get reinforced, and the reason why is behind it, so that they're more likely to persist if the reason is given why something was good.
Well, I would say also what's interesting to me is that the shortcuts in language that we've come up with are really reinforced by grading systems. Because we say, this is an A, this is a B, oh, this is C work. But we don't do the describing. And it's only through the describing and that specificity that you know what the work is and what the quality is and what you see in it. So I think that we have to really be very careful that we don't use all these shortcuts when we can really be the people who promote the full description, the full language, the full recognition of the habits that brought you to the place where you were, so that you're not just saying you got an A, but you're saying, let's look and see what was it that you did in your work and in your work habits and in your process that brought you to the place where you did this quality work. I remember that kindergarten child when I was in Sao Paulo again, who did that amazing thing where he figured out a way to take a bucket from down on the ground and bring it up to the top of his tree house.
Yes, yes.
He was all by himself. He was a kindergarten child.
Yes.
He was up in this little tree house. His mom was in the kitchen doing work, and he was just busy, and she had no idea what he was doing. And then he called her and said, Mom, I solved a problem. And then she came out and he said, I was really persisting here. And I was able to get this bucket and make a hook, bring it up, take it up from the ground it was like this amazing process. And his mom just went, wow.
Right.
I am responding with wonderment and awe. This is amazing.
That's true. That's absolutely true. So those are the kinds of habits and the kinds of thinking that we want to instill in all of our children. We have a question all the way from Sao Paulo, straight to you guys. I think we have West Coast and Northeast, right, of the US. For many parents, virtual education still represents a major challenge. In general, they perceive learning difficulties or limitations that the current situation demands. This often puts greater pressure on children. How can habits of mind help parents feel even more motivated to persist on this journey? And how can we adults develop our own habits to better encourage children?
Well, it's almost answered in the question. Right. Because I think what she's really, is it a she?
It's a she, yes.
Okay, yeah. I think what she's really saying is that it's discouraging. It's discouraging. We are now in a time when we're planning for something that we don't know when the deadline is.
Right.
We really are just trying to really figure that out. And so it certainly is discouraging. However, we are all finding to make our way to make it as positive as possible. And when a child is feeling like the routine of study, see, that's the thing I'm thinking about. Study and learning are not necessarily the same thing. So when you study, you're learning something new, yes, but when you're applying it in the world in which you are living, and even though the world of the home is more narrow than you're used to, there's an awful lot at home that is learning. So if you stop thinking as a parent about how do I help them do their studies, and you try to understand where the learning is in your home and help them to find it. I've seen kids during this time come up with the most amazing things. One child I saw here in the US who's he's probably about a 6th grade child, and he decided, I've always wanted to play the banjo. Where that came from, the parent has no idea, but she was able, through the grace of Amazon, to get a banjo. And then YouTube. And he sits every day and studies how he is going to be able to learn how to play the banjo. And maybe that's one of his most important learning experiences. So finding something that they're curious about, that they're interested in, and letting them find and pursue their passion. And if in fact they're not finishing all the work that school requires, giving them some breathing space, giving them a chance to just learn through play as much as they can, because they really do need to have what we all need. Take a breath, be mindful, find your center, and allow yourself for that. And I think that that's true for the parents as well. So when the parents are saying, you know, we've got to get this done. This time, you have to get this finished. Instead, you've got to find your breath, manage your impulsivity, begin to think about, what can I do today that will help my child to find something he never knew before? I would say that maybe one of the most exciting things is when you allow your child, through the habit of creating, imagining, and innovating, to discover something within himself that he didn't know before because he didn't have the time to find it out.
I think we also have a larger goal, and that is not only to have students learn the content of what they're being taught in school and their own interests at this time, but the focus should be on the process of learning, because we want students to be continuous learners. And I'm sure that parents want their kids to continue to learn how to learn even after school is over and as they graduate and go on into business and get married and have families of their own, that what stays with us over time is the fact that we are continuous learners. And so these learnings, these habits of mind are milestones that they go through along the way, and they continue to learn and use them and respond to them more and more throughout their lifetimes. I think that as I have grown older, I find that the habits of mind work for me, not only as a learner, but also as a parent, as a husband, and as a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather, that I want my kids to be continuous learners, and I want them to learn the habits of mind as well.
I think two things come to mind based on what you guys just shared. One is the idea, and it came in on the last question that we were talking about with regards to feedback and how important it is to give children this explicit feedback, and then to also allow their creativity to bubble and to foment in during these times. But one of the things that that I connect to is when we're reporting. I know that some parents at Concept have said, "Oh my gosh, when you guys send those reports out, those reports are so long. Can't you guys just give me an A, a B, a C, a D, an F?" And that's exactly what we tell them is, what do those letter grades mean, right? They are not the complete picture. And in order to have the complete picture, you need to be able to describe the learning that is happening and being able to describe what the child has done. And that is so much more complete than A, B, C, or 100, 50, 70, 82. Like, what do those numbers mean? And what are the values of those numbers? And then the other thing that comes to mind with your sharing is just the idea of really allowing your child to discover their different interests and passions. We had so many different children who came up with service learning projects during this time. And these projects have been beautiful. We had a child that put together her own podcast because she felt that she's a middle school child, and she felt that in the world of news, the news was just too confusing for teenagers to even get what's happening. So she said, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to interview these people, and I'm going to get information firsthand from infectologists, from psychologists, so that I can just share with people my age, and I can just ask them questions that are relevant for us, and I can just put this out to the world. And so she created this wonderful channel on Spotify that's called Helpful-ish. So so I mean, it's so funny. It's fabulous, you know? And I was like, wow, she was able to find humor in such a something that's serious and heavy. Like, she's talking to infectologists and doctors and nurses and, psychologists. And here she put something together that's called Helpful-ish for the teenage audience. And there was another child that he is delivering lunch boxes around the city of Sao Paulo with his mom and dad. And while his mom and dad dad is doing the distribution, mom is cooking, and now he's helping to pack those lunch boxes because he saw that his parents were actually super engaged in service. And it's something that he didn't picture himself doing before in the past. And how valuable, what kinds of lessons are these kids learning throughout these processes? Yeah. So I just think that it's so powerful, like the banjo, or we had another student who started playing the ukulele, and just all these different things that come up because different passions are discovered through, maybe it's an inspiration through a video or through a movie or through a teacher or through a book that they're reading. And then things just spark up with regards to what is it that I can do to either make a difference or to invest in a personal goal or to explore something new.
Well, certainly in this time where everything is so matters of such concern, the pandemic, the uprising of some of the things that are going on here in the US, a lot of things that are happening. We want these young people to feel not only that they will have a future, but they own the future. And I think that those beautiful ideas of how they find ways to show gratitude, to be kind, to be helpful, to build community. I mean, I just think that every time I've ever been to Escola Concept, that's what I feel and I experience in those schools. And I think it's just a beautiful experience that now they're getting a chance to actually do that at home and to really realize that we're all a part of this community. Parents, children, all of us adults, everyone, even us old folks. Would you say so, Art?
I hope so. I haven't kicked the bucket yet, so I'm still around and I want to be part of the community. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we're so proud to say that the two of you are part of our community of learners, and that the two of you have helped our community of continuous learners continue to grow, develop, and flourish. So with that, I thank you so much for being with us today and for dedicating, I know, time out of your busy schedules during the pandemic, trying to find time to inspire us even further, to connect with us even deeper, and to just share. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And with that, we end our In Mind series for today. We cannot wait to have you guys all join us either tomorrow for our Morning Bite series, which will be super exciting at 10 o'clock. We have it's World Environment Day tomorrow, so we have two specialists that will be with us. We have a young woman who recently graduated from UNC and from Duke University, And her name is Emily Kian. And 4 years ago, she was one of the 15 young adults around the world who received a full ride to UNC and Duke. And she was able to study environmental studies. And she was able to build her own startup called FIDA. And tomorrow, Emily will be with us. And Dr. Varley Nascimento, who is the general director of Embrapa Hortaliças, and he will be with us as well. He actually spent some time in the U.S. Throughout his journey and his doctoral program and his postdoctoral program. And Dr. Varley will also be with us tomorrow in this mini roundtable. So Emily, myself, and Dr. Varley. So we're really excited about that at 10 o'clock. And then next week for our morning bites on Tuesday, we have a mindfulness expert, Dr. Marcia Tellis, who will be talking to us about confidence and calming the mind. And she has done some work for many years at Harvard University. And it'll be our pleasure to receive her in our morning bites. And in our In Mind series on Thursday, we will welcome Damien Babel from Boston College, talking to us about measuring what matters. So here's our week update for the next week, our 3 next talks. We hope that you guys can join us on any one of them. And see you, thank you, and enjoy your evening with your family, your friends, and your loved ones. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.